Hi everyone, welcome back to the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. This week we are going to be working on this cute little piece that's behind me, and the reason I chose a piece of this size is because I want to feature one of the new collections from Redesign with Prima. It's called Pastel Artistry, and this particular transfer comes in 3 different sizes. So this is the large size transfer here, and then it also comes in a mini transfer, and I have another project that I'm doing in this mini transfer, and then it has a middy as well. And the middy size transfer is perfect for furniture pieces of this size that are just a little bit smaller than full size. This is probably an old telephone table. It is solid mahogany, so we're going to be doing some prep to treat it for a bleed through, because I definitely know mahogany tends to be a bleeder. I'm going to pull my color inspiration from the colors in this transfer. It's got some beautiful pinks and yellows and sage greens in there, and I think those will be some beautiful colors that I can tie in. Overall, it's going to be a really cute little piece. So, hope you guys are excited. Stick around. Let's get started. Here's where I started on this furniture piece. This is a perfect size. I love working on pieces that are this size, and it's got a nice flat front on it, which will display the transfer that I want to use perfectly. Aside from some surface scratches and things, it's actually in remarkably good condition, so I didn't need to do any repairs on this one. I started out by removing all of the hardware, unscrewing those old screws. I always make sure and I take my hardware and the existing screws and put them in a dish to be cleaned so that they stay together through the entire process. This one had some dust stashed behind the old hardware, so it definitely needed a good thorough cleaning. This piece had a label in the top drawer that said solid mahogany, and that's a perfect indicator that this one's going to be a bleeder, so I made sure to prep it using a coat of shellac. The top on this one has some dings and dents in it, so I needed to sand through it to get a smooth, even top, and it had a beautiful wood surface, so I'm going to leave this in the natural wood finish. I'm just using my Surf Prep sander and an 80 grit paper to take off this old existing clear coat. Thankfully, this is a pretty small piece, so sanding over the wood, my Surf Prep made quick work of it. After this 80 grit, I'm going to use a 120 and then a 220 grit to get the smoothest wood surface possible. Once my shellac was fully dry, I did choose to add some Wise-Owl primer in light gray over the top, and that was just to get a uniform color and help my paint get better coverage over the top. I like painting over a coat of primer, and shellac tends to have a pretty glossy surface on it, so adding the primer I feel like helps the piece accept the paint a little bit better. I knew that I wanted to do just a simple 2-color blended finish on this piece, and when I want to do blending, I choose Wise-Owl Chalk Synthesis paint. The colors that I'm going to use on this one are Thunderstruck and Ivory. The Thunderstruck is actually a shade of gray, but it's got some purpley undertones, so it's actually the perfect dusty lavender. I'm using my Klingon S50 brushes, a brush for each color, and I started out by outlining around the edges in the Thunderstruck, and I used a diluted coat of the Thunderstruck in the center of my piece where I plan on putting the Ivory. That's going to allow these 2 colors to just blend together. And then I'm going to go around them once I add my Ivory to the center and just start working these colors into each other. This is just my base coat, so I don't worry too much about getting these blends perfect just yet. I finished this process all around all 4 sides of my table and then down onto the legs. I wasn't sure at first what color I wanted to do the base of these legs, so I left them in the primer. Here is what the piece looked like after a coat of paint on the entire surface and my top all sanded down. Now it's time to come back and repeat the process for my second coat. I did a light sanding over the surface with a 220 grit sandpaper before getting it ready for my second coat. That just helps my surface be extra smooth and no dust or debris that might have settled into my paint be underneath my second coat. With this second coat of paint, I do tend to use a little bit more water than I did on my first coat, and that's because I've got this chalky finish underneath that I need to go over top of. I also don't need as much coverage with my paint because I got most of the coverage that I needed from that first coat, and I'm just doing this coat to perfect my finishes. So I'm repeating the process using my Klingon brushes again, a brush for each color, and I brush that Thunderstruck around the outer edges and then a little spot of the Ivory into the center. My number 1 pet peeve with blending is when it looks like there's a floating orb in the center. That's not my goal. My goal is to make it look like the light is just hitting it a little bit differently in the center of this piece. So I really want these colors to transition into each other. I don't want there to be a definitive line where the Ivory stops and the Thunderstruck starts. I want to make sure that I work these colors into each other. I'm going to do that using my Klingon B10 brush, and the B10 brush is a wide block brush. I'm going to brush through the Thunderstruck and the Ivory and using a cross-hatching motion work those paint colors into each other. Let's put on some music and repeat the process on another side of this piece. With 2 coats of paint on my entire body and that drying, I wanted to come up and pay attention to the top. I chose to use a walnut colored gel stain from General Finishes. This is my absolute favorite gel stain to use, and I'm just going to give 1 coat of this to the top. I want it to be as natural looking as possible and just a light hint of the walnut. I'm applying this just using a cotton sock. This is where laundry goes to die in my house. I'm applying the gel stain going with the grain of the wood and just working in 1 coat until that wood is completely saturated with the gel stain. I want a nice uniform color, and so I'll go over the entire surface and then brush it in long, even linear strokes that run the full length of my table so that there's no stop and start marks in between. At this point, my table looked so pretty, even just with this wood finish, and so I chose to go ahead and throw that hardware back on and take some photos with just this painted finish. What do you guys think? This is a beautiful point when you could also stop, but I like to dress my pieces up just a little bit more, so this one's not done yet. I'm adding the new pastel artistry transfer from Redesign with Prima, and this is in the middy size. This is a perfect size for this little table, and I'm actually getting multiple projects out of this one tiny little transfer. This telephone table along with a jewelry box I've already done, and I still will have pieces of the transfer left over for yet another piece. I'm going to apply this transfer and wrap it around all the moldings on this table and on the drawer fronts as well, and I do that by cutting the transfer into pieces. You can see when I pop this drawer back into place that my pattern matches up perfectly. So that's where I start, is I will match the pattern up and then press that transfer into place using the transfer tool that comes in the package. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and slice off the excess of this transfer using a razor knife, this one little piece, and I can use that in another spot if I desire. Then I'm going to use the transfer tool to rub this transfer down, pulling back on that clear backing sheet as I go. Flat fronts are always much easier when you're doing transfers. Molded portions are a little bit harder, so start with a flat surface if you're just getting started with your transfers. Once I have the transfer rubbed onto this entire surface, I'm going to remove my drawer and just press it into place around all of those moldings, making sure that I'm wrapping all of the sides. With my transfer in place, this piece is just about done. It's ready for some clear coat. So I'm going to brush on some satin varnish from Wiesel Paint, and I'm going to do this using one of their premium brushes. I actually really like these brushes for applying clear coat. They hold just the right amount and they get a really nice, smooth, even coat. These are great for applying just the thin coats that are required with clear coat. I start by applying the clear coat to the center of my piece, and then I'm going to brush it from the center to the outer edges. Once I've got that clear coat nice and even, I'm going to go back and clean up my brush strokes going from one end of the piece to the other so I have no stopping or starting points in the center of my piece. I also need to seal over the top of this transfer, and I'm going to do that using my same satin varnish from Wiesel. I lightly fill my brush using a little bit of my clear coat, and then I'm going to brush it into place, and I'll clean up my brush strokes going from one end of the piece to the other. When I'm brushing clear coat, I always make sure to come back and make sure I don't have any drips that can tend to gather in between my drawers and in all the small crevices. I just want this to be a thin, even coat. I can always come back and apply more coats afterwards. The final touch that I like to do on all my pieces is pay some attention to the inside as well, and I'm going to do that using Wiesel Furniture Salve. I'm going to apply this using a brush and massage it into the wood on the entire interior of my drawer and on my drawer sides and back as well. The final finishing touch on this one was to spray it in 2 coats of Wiesel matte varnish using my paint sprayer. This is going to seal my paint and my transfer and also that wood stain top and give them some added durability. My recommendations for care are just to wipe down with a damp rag. This piece is super cute. I love how it turned out. This color combination is perfect with this transfer. I may actually try to find a match for this table and make a set out of it in the long run. I'm not quite sure yet, but here's the finished product. You guys can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click that subscribe button for weekly tutorials here at Brush by Brandy on YouTube.